It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I decided to stop by my parents' house. I had just wrapped up some errands and thought it would be nice to spend a little time with Mom and Dad. With the holidays approaching, I figured I could check in, maybe even make some plans for something special. As I pulled up to their driveway, something caught my eye. My wife's car was parked outside. That struck me as odd. She hadn't mentioned anything about visiting my parents today. I wondered if she had planned a surprise, maybe to coordinate holiday arrangements with Mom. I stepped out of my car, my boots crunching softly against the gravel. Walking toward the front door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, just enough to let some voices escape. I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. But then I heard my mother's voice, low but unmistakable. "How was your date, dear?" she asked, her tone a strange mixture of concern and casual familiarity. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. A date? I scrambled for context. Perhaps she was speaking to one of her friends, someone else. But then I heard my wife's voice, calm and unhurried, responding. "It went well. Thank you for asking." There was a pause, followed by a soft, almost girlish laugh that twisted something deep inside me. "I guess I wasn't careful enough, though." "Careful about what?" my mother pressed, her voice sharp with interest. "Well," my wife continued, her tone light, even playful, "I still have dried, around my mouth. I must look like an idiot." My breath caught in my throat, a cold weight settling in my chest. A toxic mix of disbelief and dread churned inside me. I struggled to hear, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the words that had just pierced my reality. My mother's voice returned, scolding but not unkind. "Clean yourself up, for heaven's sake. Next time, be more careful, and for God's sake, don't forget the mouthwash. What if my son saw you like this?" And then came the dagger that shattered the world I thought I knew. "What would I do without you?" my wife murmured, her voice changing, subdued and almost reverent. "Thank you for helping with the pregnancy termination. If your son found out..." Her voice trailed off, leaving the thought to hang in the air like a dark cloud. My stomach churned, my hands growing cold. My mother's voice followed, almost soothing, as if she were reassuring my wife. "You've got me, dear. I won't let that happen. But remember, be more discreet next time." I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing like a drum in my ears. Rage, humiliation, sorrow. They collided inside me, each emotion threatening to overwhelm the other. I reached out to push the door open, but my hand faltered. I staggered back, my body shaking, every fiber of my being trembling with fury. My mind screamed, but no words came out. I wanted to storm in, confront them both, demand answers, make them feel even a fraction of the devastation I was experiencing. But I couldn't. Not yet. I turned away, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. I backed up slowly, each step heavier than the last. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I reached my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart still thundered, but now it was pure, unrelenting anger. I drove away without a word, the hum of the engine a dull backdrop to the chaos inside me. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the streets empty, silent, just like the space inside my chest. My mind replayed every word I had overheard, each one a blade carving deeper into my soul. Emily, my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, the one I had built a life with, and my own mother, complicit in this betrayal. A terminated pregnancy, an affair, all of it hidden from me, all of it so deeply woven into the fabric of my life that I couldn't escape the sheer weight of it. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the pain in my hand hardly registering as the fury boiled hotter inside me. When I finally returned home, I had made up my mind. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. They had played with my life, my trust, my love. They were going to pay for it. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I kissed Emily on the cheek as she prepared breakfast, my stomach churning at the feel of her lips against mine. She smiled, completely unaware of the storm that raged inside me, her bright expression hiding the dark truth that now consumed my every thought. I played with Lily and Jack in the living room, their laughter, innocent, pure, filling the air. Each smile they gave me made the weight of what I had to do feel even heavier. But I couldn't back down now. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them. They deserved better than a mother who could lie, cheat, and destroy everything for her own selfish gain. Later that evening, when the kids were asleep, everything would change. But for now I waited. I decided to confront Emily about something trivial. A forgotten errand, perhaps, or some insignificant detail. The exact nature of the conversation didn't matter. What mattered was how she responded. She lied with such ease, such practiced smoothness, that it hit me like a slap. Each denial, every subtle misdirection, each perfectly timed smile, they were all part of her well-honed arsenal. Watching her, I realized just how much practice she must have had. I pressed a little harder, pushing her to slip, and that's when she snapped. "Why are you being so paranoid lately?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing with annoyance. "I can't even have a conversation with you without you jumping down my throat." I took a step back, feigning defeat, not wanting to reveal my hand just yet. "You're right," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm sorry. Work has been stressful." Her demeanor softened almost instantly, her hand reaching out to touch my arm. "I know, babe. I'm sorry too. Let's not fight, okay?" Her touch burned like acid against my skin. I nodded, forcing a smile, the fake warmth stinging more than any argument. Of course. No more fighting. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I began planning. The gears of my mind turned relentlessly. Over the next few weeks, I gathered evidence, carefully, methodically. I installed a small camera in the living room, one in the kitchen, and another in our bedroom. Whenever she left her phone unattended, I went through it, screenshotting incriminating texts and saving suggestive photos. I even followed her one afternoon, when she claimed she was running errands. Sure enough, I found her meeting a man at a coffee shop, a tall, well-dressed figure with slicked-back hair and a smug grin. They laughed together, touched each other, leaned in far too close to be just friends. But it wasn't just her. My surveillance wasn't just about watching my wife anymore. It was about documenting her destruction. The real blow came a week later, when I stumbled upon a hidden folder on her laptop. Inside, I found photographs of her with him on dates, in hotel rooms, even lounging on our couch while I was at work. There was one particularly disturbing photo of them in our bed. My mother appeared in a few of them too, smiling like she was in on some private joke. But the worst discovery was a video. I couldn't stomach watching it all. But what I did see was enough to understand what had happened. She had brought him into our bed. I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to confront my mother. I went to her house, throwing the stack of printed photos onto the kitchen counter with a sharp slap. She glanced at them, then at me, her face carefully blank, a mask of innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice steady, unreadable. "Don't play dumb with me, Mom," I snarled, my voice thick with rage. "You knew. You helped her." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally she spoke, her tone sharp, defensive. "It's not what you think. You've been so busy with work, so absent. She needed someone. I was just trying to protect her. And you too, in a way." "Protect me?" I barked, a bitter laugh, disbelief and fury rising within me. By helping her cheat? By hiding a pregnancy she didn't even have the decency to tell me about? "Lower your voice," she hissed, glancing toward the hallway where my father was watching TV. "We don't need to involve your father in this." But I was done protecting their secrets. The time for quiet observation was over. Whatever love I had once felt for Emily and my mother had turned to ash. And in its place, there was nothing but cold, calculated fury. If they wanted to treat me like a fool, they were about to learn just how dangerous a fool could be. I spent the next week preparing for the storm I was about to unleash. My first priority was ensuring the children wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. I took leave from work and convinced Emily to let me take the kids to a nearby city for a weekend getaway. She hesitated at first, no doubt worried about losing her time with her lover. But I assured her it was a bonding trip. She relented, probably relieved to have the house to herself. While the kids played in the pool with a babysitter I hired, I went to work. I combed through every piece of evidence I had gathered, texts, photos, receipts, emails. I compiled everything into a meticulous dossier, One copy was for the courts, one for her workplace, and a very special digital version that I would soon send to every family member, friend, and neighbor we'd ever known. But that wasn't enough. No, I needed them to feel the devastation I had endured. When I returned home, I acted as though everything was normal. Emily greeted me with her usual perfunctory kiss, her smile plastered on her face, completely unaware of the storm that had been building. My mother even stopped by to see the kids. I fought to keep my composure, but inside, I was savoring every moment. I knew this would be the last time they saw me as the clueless husband and son. The next morning, while Emily was out at yoga, a laughable excuse at this point, I put my plan into motion. I began with her workplace. "Hi, this is Mark Taylor, Emily's husband," I said, my voice calm but authoritative. "I just thought you should know about a situation involving your employee and her misuse of company resources. You might want to check her expense reports for unauthorized charges, hotels, restaurant tabs, things like that. Oh, and I'll be forwarding you some evidence shortly." Within an hour, I had emailed her boss, including screenshots of texts where Emily discussed business trips that were, in reality, rendezvous with her lover. I included receipts for hotel stays charged to her company, and soon enough, I knew it would be impossible for her to deny it. That afternoon, I made an anonymous call to her lover's wife. Yes, he was married, too, of course he was. I had found her contact information during my digital snooping, and now it was time for her to know the truth. "Hi, you don't know me," I began, my voice steady. "But I thought you'd want to know that your husband has been having an affair with my wife for months. I have proof, if you'd like to see it." She didn't hesitate. "Send it to me." I forwarded her the same evidence I had sent Emily's boss. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a reply. "Thank you for telling me. You won't know what hit him." And I knew. Neither would Emily nor my mother. 2 days later, the bomb went off. Emily's boss called her into a meeting, where she was confronted with the evidence of her fraudulent expense claims. She tried to deny it, of course, but the proof was irrefutable. By the end of the day, she was unemployed. That evening, her lover's wife arrived at our house unannounced. She arrived like a storm, furious, red-faced, and carrying a suitcase. The moment I opened the door, she demanded, "Is Emily here?" "She's out," I replied, feigning confusion. She didn't even pause. "Tell her this is from Sarah," she snarled, thrusting the suitcase into my hands before storming off. Inside the suitcase were all the gifts her husband had bought Emily. Jewelry, clothes, even a handwritten note confessing his love. I left the suitcase on the dining room table for Emily to find when she returned. When she walked in and saw it, her face went pale. "What's this?" she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "Sarah dropped it off," I said, my voice cold as ice. "Seems like she knows about you and her husband now." Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, desperate to find a way to spin her lies. But I didn't give her the chance. "Don't bother," I snapped. "I know everything, Emily. The affair, the pregnancy, the lies. And now, so does everyone else." Her eyes went wide with panic. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I mean your boss knows. Sarah knows. Our friends and family will all know by tomorrow," I said, watching her crumble. She froze, her face crumpling, and she collapsed into a chair sobbing. "Mark, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I can explain." "Explain it to the judge," I said, throwing a folder under the table. Inside was the divorce petition I had already filed, along with the request for full custody of the kids. Her head snapped up, the tears replaced by a flicker of rage. "You can't do this to me." "Oh, but I can," I said, my voice low and venomous. "You destroyed this family. Now you get to live with the consequences." The next day, I confronted my mother at her house. My father was there too, sitting in his recliner, the TV on mute. "Tell Dad what you've been doing," I said, my voice calm but deadly. My mother looked up, confusion flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about how you helped Emily cheat on me," I said, my voice rising. "How you covered for her, lied to me, and even helped her get rid of a pregnancy without telling me." My father sat up straight, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Is this true, Margaret?" he asked, his voice cold. She stammered, trying to find the right words, but I didn't give her the chance. I slammed a stack of photos onto the coffee table. each one more damning than the last. "Don't bother lying," I said. "You're just as guilty as she is." My father stared at the photos, his face turning red with fury. "Margaret," he growled, "what the hell is this?" My mother burst into tears, but I felt no sympathy. She had chosen her side, and now she could live with the fallout. As I walked out of the house, I heard my father yelling, his voice shaking with anger. Within a week, Emily moved out, taking only what the courts allowed her. Her reputation was in ruins. Her lover had left her, and even her friends turned their backs once the truth came out. My mother's betrayal didn't end there. 2 months later, my father filed for divorce. He moved into a small apartment and cut all contact with her, and I did the same. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the constant betrayal. It wasn't the life I had wanted, but it was the one I had earned. I would rebuild it, brick by brick, without them. Emily was gone. Her things were packed into a few boxes and shoved out onto the porch. The kids were adjusting slowly but surely. Lily had started asking where Mommy was less frequently, and Jack, too young to fully understand, was content with my reassurances that everything would be fine. I poured all my energy into them, focusing on being the father they deserved. But even with Emily out of the house, her shadow lingered. The wounds she had left ran deep, and I wasn't ready to let go of the anger. Not yet. I had taken careful steps to ensure her downfall was as thorough as it was devastating. But there was still one loose end I hadn't tied up. Her lover. Daniel. The smug, well-dressed parasite who thought he could waltz into my life and take what was mine. I had done my homework on him, and what I found was far from flattering. Daniel wasn't just a businessman, he was a fraud. He built his reputation on charm, connections, and greasy under-the-table deals. His consulting firm had a pristine public image, but I discovered cracks beneath the surface. Financial irregularities, shady partnerships, and whispers of unethical practices. It was time to bring him down. I started small, anonymously tipping off his competitors, leaking just enough information to make them dig deeper. Then, I sent a damning file of financial records to a reporter at the local paper. I had obtained the documents through less than legal means, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The article hit 2 weeks later, exposing Daniel's shady dealings and sparking an investigation into his company. Overnight, his reputation crumbled. Clients pulled their contracts. Investors fled. The vultures circled. But I wasn't satisfied. Daniel's wife, Sarah, contacted me again after I first exposed Emily's affair. She was furious, of course, but she also wanted to make sure I knew just how deep his betrayal ran. Apparently, Emily wasn't his only mistress. Daniel had a history of affairs, each one more brazen than the last. "You want to make him suffer?" Sarah asked during one of our late-night calls. I could feel the ruthlessness in her voice, and I admired it. Together, we plotted the next stage. Sarah filed for divorce and made sure to include every sordid detail of Daniel's infidelity in the paperwork. The legal documents became public record, and soon the media caught wind of the story. By the time Daniel realized what was happening, it was too late. His face was plastered across the news. His name was dragged through the mud. His company collapsed within a month. His once perfect life was reduced to ashes. But even as I watched Daniel's world burn, I knew I wasn't finished. My mother was still lurking in the background, clinging to whatever scraps of dignity she had left. My father had cut her off completely, and she had retreated to her sister's house in disgrace. Still, she hadn't learned her lesson. I wasn't done yet. I couldn't shake the feeling that my mother hadn't truly paid for what she had done. There was a lingering emptiness, a need for finality, for clarity. And so, I confronted her one last time. Not for closure, but for understanding. "Why, Mom?" I asked, standing in the doorway of her sister's house. She looked older than I remembered, her face etched with guilt and exhaustion. "Why did you help her? Why did you betray me?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping, the weight of her actions crushing her. "You don't understand, Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "She needed me. She was scared." "Scared of what?" I interrupted, unable to contain the bitterness. "Of me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of facing the consequences of her actions." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Don't you dare try to justify this, I said, my voice low but steady. You didn't protect me. You betrayed me. I was trying to protect you, she suddenly shouted, her voice breaking with emotion. I didn't want you to find out. I didn't want you to lose everything. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the silence of the room. Lose everything, Mom? I did lose everything. My marriage. My trust in you. My sense of safety in my own home. Everything. And you helped her do it. Her sobs filled the room as she broke down into her hands. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just cold detachment. You don't get to play the victim here, I said, my voice cutting through her cries. You made your choice. Now live with it. I turned and walked away, leaving her there alone with the weight of her regrets. Months passed, and the fallout from my decisions settled like the ash after a wildfire. Life began to rebuild itself slowly but surely. I moved into a new house with the kids, smaller but warm and full of love. Emily's visitation rights were limited to supervised visits, which she rarely exercised. Her lover Daniel had vanished from public view. The once proud businessman, the man who thought he could take whatever he wanted, was now a disgraced figure, his reputation in tatters. As for my mother, I didn't speak to her again. There were moments, late at night, when the anger would resurface sharp and painful. But then I'd hear Lily's laughter, or see Jack's smile, and I'd remember why I had fought so hard to destroy the lies. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and theirs. They would grow up in a world where love was real, where trust wasn't a weapon waiting to be turned against you. That was worth every battle I'd fought. Months turned into a year, and the dust began to settle. Life wasn't the same, of course, it couldn't be. But in the wake of destruction, something unexpected emerged: clarity. The clarity to see who I truly was, and who I was becoming. Emily had faded into a shadow of her former self. The woman who once laughed and danced in my arms was now a ghost, consumed by regret and desperation. She had moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town, far from the comfortable life I had once provided. The occasional supervised visits with Lily and Jack were awkward and mechanical, her guilt thick in the air, her presence strained and uncomfortable. Lily, once so attached to her mother, now clung to me instead. Jack, too young to fully understand, barely noticed Emily's absence. As for Daniel, he had become an afterthought. The last I heard, he was drowning in legal battles, his former clients suing him for breach of contract, fraud, and a litany of other offenses. His ex-wife, Sarah, had taken him to the cleaners, leaving him penniless and isolated. It was poetic justice, but I didn't bother keeping tabs on him anymore. I had gotten what I wanted: ruin. He was nothing more than a forgotten page in my story. The real battle, though, had always been with myself. For so long, I had carried my rage like armor, letting it guide every move I made. It had kept me sharp, focused, unyielding. But now, with my enemies defeated and my life rebuilt, I realized I no longer needed that armor. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it no longer defined me. My children were my anchor. Their laughter and love pulled me back from the edge, grounding me in a way nothing else could. One evening, I stood in our backyard, watching Lily and Jack chase each other through the fading light. Their giggles filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence that had once weighed on me so heavily. I took a deep breath, the cool breeze carrying with it a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. "Hey, Dad," Lily called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "Come play with us." I smiled, setting down the mug of coffee I had been holding. All right, I'm coming." As I joined them, running and laughing under the setting sun, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that, and maybe I never would be. But it was acceptance. Acceptance of the life I had now. Imperfect, yes, but mine. Months later, I received a letter from my mother. It was handwritten, pages long, filled with apologies and explanations. She claimed to have acted out of fear, out of a misguided sense of loyalty to Emily, and 1,000 other excuses that no longer mattered. At the bottom of the letter she wrote, "I know I can never make this right. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me, even if I don't deserve it." I stared at the letter for a long time, the words blurring together as I tried to make sense of them. Did I want to forgive her? Could I? In the end, I didn't reply. Some wounds, I realized, weren't meant to heal. On the anniversary of the day I uncovered everything, I sat alone in the living room after the kids had gone to bed. A glass of whiskey rested in my hand, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. I thought about Emily, about my mother, about the life I had before everything fell apart. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the sadness beneath the anger, the loss of a future I had once believed in. It hurt, but it also felt like a release. As the clock struck midnight, I raised my glass to the empty room, to the past. And to leaving it behind, I murmured. I drained the glass and set it down, the final chapter of my old life, closing with the soft clink of crystal against wood. Tomorrow would be a new day, and this time it was mine to write.